Hello, everyone, and welcome to Esoterica. I'm Leah Eichler, and I'm delighted that you've decided to join us today. Today, we are speaking with Oritte Bendory. Now, Oritte is a writer with over 20 years of experience working across multiple mediums, screenplays, short story sales to studios. She's been published in a nonfiction series for Simon & Schuster, or anthology rather. She's authored, I can go on and on, authored novels. She launched a popular blog. She pitched a TV series. I'm like she is a one-woman machine. So welcome, Oritte.
Thank you. Wow. What an intro. Great to be here, Leah.
It's really great to chat with you. So there's lots on the plate today, but I really want to start off. Oritte recently published an essay in an anthology called Midlife on Fire. Oh, get that in there, Midlife on Fire. And it really caught my attention because I'm in midlife. so Midlife on Fire. And, it struck me that I'll have you to talk about the essay. Why don't you tell me about the essay?
Yeah. Well, the essay, is always it's sort of the tail end of that's been underground, the journey that I've lived getting to this point in my life and in midlife where the motherhood journey, the fertility journey, and the career journey as well that you so kindly prefaced with sort of getting to this point in life where I think many women feel that it's overlooked sort of the beauty around making these choices and in your midlife rather than when you're in your 20s or your 30s and you're overwhelmed or you do become a parent and then your life starts later, or the loss of career that you might have had, and all of those kinds of conflicts and struggles that many of them, I believe, being here now, it's sort of being older absolves you of a lot of those existential burdens and questions of what's going to happen when I'm in my midlife and my kids are out of the house and my career is gone, or I have to restart this. And those sort of grieving moments of the life you could have led if you were, had not been a parent. And of course, that doesn't detract it. It's, a beautiful thing. And I always wanted to be a mother, but, so the essay really is about the beauty of choosing motherhood in midlife and I feel that's always been my path. And there are reasons that perhaps the fertility journeys, I got married to my now husband a bit later. So we had to sort of rush to try to do that because we wanted to be parents. And yet when those fertility attempts did not succeed, I did believe there was a bigger reason for it, that the timing wasn't quite there, or that it wasn't the path that we were meant to be on. And so ultimately it led us to where we are now, where we're pursuing adoption. And I trust it. And I believe that it's right. And it's also letting go and knowing that I didn't have control anymore. And therefore a lot of the career struggles that I have are suddenly flourishing. It's as if there is a way to do both, and to have and to trust and see what will come, and then sort of cross that bridge at the time.
Right. So where are you right now in the adoption process?
Well, it was something we knew we wanted to do deep in our hearts, but we pursued science and reproductive technology and all that, and which is a lot of what my writing ended up being in that interim, which I'll talk about as well. So now we just completed our home study. The paperwork is crazy. When people say, "Oh, you can just adopt. If you can get pregnant, you'll just adopt." I never thought of it as a backup plan, right? For us, it's the plan. So there's a sort of demystifying that, and then all the paperwork. It's so you don't just decide to get pregnant and then you got a baby, and I know that's got its own hurdles, obviously, challenges. But they make it really, really hard for you to help a baby.
Right.
And so that can be very daunting. And so constantly returning to that place of why am I doing this is my purpose. This is what I want, and pushing through. So that was a mountain to climb, and it was a reason I think we delayed. And then with the pandemic, we sort of dropped it. So now we're about to advertise to this private adoption, domestic adoption. So for newborns, so we're about to start advertising to get it to get matched with a baby.
Oh, so you have to advertise, like you have to sell yourselves as a family, essentially. Is that how it works?
And I used to be in advertising, so although this is different
This is right up your alley. I get in a weird sort of way.
tagline, Leah, you're a writer. My log line for myself, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, you've been writing about fertility and motherhood for, I think you mentioned 10 years now. So, I mean, it started with the anthology, the Simon & Schuster anthology, where you wrote about this. Can you tell, like, let's backtrack. So where have you come in that 10 years?
So it's a great question. That essay was after a divorce that I had. That was a very long stage and period of my life when I was younger. And then suddenly being off on my own in my late 30s, starting over from scratch, essentially, and all those fears. And I thought I'd go freeze my eggs and, sort of put the insurance in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And so that essay was called The Chicken or the Egg, and it sort of charts that experience, but how I ultimately decided not to do that. And we can get into the more philosophical reasons around just that false insurance and just not believing that the right thing will happen, and fearing that if I had, and this is in that essay, that if I had done that, it would somehow trick me or divert me to choosing things that I might not otherwise be meant to choose.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and then coming over that, but that was the beginning of, and then here I am, and a decade later,
Right.
never believing when I wrote that essay that I would be where I am today or pursuing that path. Yeah.
So, I mean, how has midlife changed, or the perception of midlife? I mean, I find it hard to even acknowledge that I'm in midlife, but I guess I am. What does it mean anymore, really?
Right.
And is it important?
Right. Well, I think it's starting to become, I don't say destigmatized, and women embracing that and being more visible. We are as artists, as storytellers, as CEOs, as entrepreneurs, and all of that. That we found our voice. We know who we are, and it's not just you be a better mother. We're wiser, and there's so much strength and humility and maturity that comes with that I think in a way mitigates or a lot of that sort of, oh, I'm getting old, and this is actually the opposite,
Right.
So
it's interesting. I mean, in terms of, midlife, like I was always petrified of this concept, and I never really wanted to really embrace it. And there does seem to be this embracing of midlife, especially during the pandemic. Everyone goes gray, and this is great. I haven't done that, but I mean, is like in terms of having a baby at midlife, I mean, do people still question it? Is it something that your colleagues question, or professionally question, or your friends? Like, do they say, "Are you sure?" I mean, are you too old? I mean,
no. Although there are women I know at my age who are embarking on single motherhood, surrogacy,
right.
And it depends, and I'm sure there have been people going, "What are you doing? Are you sure?" I have not experienced that. It's been unbelievable support from friends and family. It's also because I believe that I'm convicted,
Right.
and so it's clear. And what I've been through a lot in my life, I mean, as many of us have. And so there's a trust there. It's like, best what your life is, what you need to do.
So, I mean, you mentioned earlier in a conversation before this interview that there was this moment, post your divorce where either your ex partner said, "Are you ever going to have children? Like, how can you have?" I mean, I mean, because I think a lot of people are in that position where they're afraid to leave a relationship because they think this is my one chance at having a baby. I mean, tell me what was going through your head at the time.
Completely. And I that was in that first essay, and in a sort of funny way, but like, you're going to be off on your own. You're no spring chicken, looking back, total spring chicken.
Right.
I was 37 going on 20. But it was part of the blog I used to write called the Kugel Chronicles, Tales of a Jewish Cougar.
Right.
It was about living my sort of boot camp in my 30s of the 20s that I never got to live in, anyway, dating in New York. But it really, in hindsight, I mean, that was terrifying. And I think that it almost became the joy and the beauty of all of this is that it was my, say, Achilles heel for a long time. It was the thing that I wasn't going to know. There was a lot of grief around it. Maybe that's the thing I'm just not going to have because I made this choice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was the sacrifice I made. I'm not going to be a mother. And I wasn't able to get pregnant. So, there was a lot of grappling with that. And then the voices, right, of others, all of that, like, when you be a mother, what are you waiting for?
Right.
Why, you're only focused on your career and writing and writing and writing and writing, and you're not getting any younger. And that's true. And yet everyone's different. Everyone's path is different. And every path has regrets and joy and bitter and sweet. And so we just kind of have to listen to, ourselves in a lot of ways. So
it's fascinating. I mean, for someone who is in the process of becoming a mother and who's actually thought about motherhood quite a bit for the last quite some time, at least decade, you've written a lot that touches on motherhood in your fiction and nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, motherhood is such a fraught concept. I mean, what do you think when people portray motherhood, even in the media right now, or in fiction, or in on film? Like, what do you think motherhood means now in popular culture, or what should it mean?
Wow, and what should it mean? It looks different for everyone, and it's an individual choice, I think. But I also think that the struggles around it, the responsibility, the loss of self, those are all real things.
Right.
That women, historically have not been able to be vocal about, right? It's taboo. So, you got to love your kids. This is what our jobs to do. And so therefore I do think is part of the essay in Midlife on Fire as well is that I don't feel that way now. I feel that I've done what I wanted to do and need to do. And yes, there was a price that I paid as well. But I don't have that conflict anymore.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your screenwriting. You have a film in development, a sci-fi film in development with Amblin Entertainment. So if I understand correctly, that's Steven Spielberg's company.
Ooh, yeah, that guy.
Wow. So tell us about that. How did that happen? What's the movie or film or story about? Tell us.
I can tell as much as I'm permitted to tell,
Sure.
But it's ironically, or not so coincidentally, about it's a cautionary tale about motherhood and about women trying to be in two places at once and doing everything and being expected to do everything. And so there's an AI component in it, and it's really about mothers questioning if they're good moms. Can I be a good mom? And work and do everything I want to do and be myself and have a good marriage. All in the process of that, what's going to give, and the real struggle with that, and then sort of solved with this near future Black Mirror, and then there's a technology that attempting deal with the devil, so to speak, where there's a technology that can alleviate all of that. So that's this, and the short. It was a short story that I wrote while I was doing another fertility attempt, and it was the irony of it. And I'm researching babies and breastfeeding and all of that while I'm giving myself hormone shots. So it was an interesting time, but the idea just came from that personal experience and fears. How am I going to do it? How am I going to do this? I wish there was a solution. I wish there was something where X, which is how a lot of my ideas come to me, and a screenplay that I have as well as another motherhood story, which is dark, but it is kind of that cautionary Faustian, deal that a woman makes to have it all and to have a child that she doesn't have to worry about. So because I had all of that, and it's not, what if I could just push a button and have a baby come out of a vending machine?
Right. Wouldn't that be great?
That'd be great.
I've thought about that too. I would
potato chips. Like, how can I get a baby?
Save a lot of time.
Ridiculous notions, right? And I think that's why sci-fi. I was never a huge, like, necessarily a sci-fi person, but it's relatable. It's very human. These are more like psychological thrillers with the sci-fi.
Right. I mean, it sounds fascinating. So, I mean, how did you get in front of Amblin? And I mean, tell us the
So
process.
yeah, so it's been a long road. My ex and I were screenwriters in LA together for a long time, so I did have some traction. Although I really did not keep a lot of those contacts when I moved back to New York and began writing books, which
Mhm.
I love. It has been my saving grace. So
Mhm.
it's been a lot of back and forth, which is ironic that I had a short story adapted for a movie. And so I reconnected with an agent that he and I had that I had lost touch with, because I really, and I've written essays about this too. And I divorced when he and I divorced Hollywood as well. And I felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I reached back out to her with a novel that I had written that's out right now for a TV series. We'll see what happens. She loved the book. And then I had this random idea for this sci-fi idea, and with her encouragement, she's at a wonderful production company, and the head of production there, they helped me develop it, and they said, let's write it as a short story. And so I did have that access, and so she took it out, and I trusted her because I
Mhm.
knew, even getting reconnected with her is an emotional journey of me coming back into Hollywood in an unexpected way through the motherhood
Of all things, yeah.
now as we're talking, you're saying how the essay that I wrote after I left, and then coming back into that world on my own terms, my own voice. It was
Mhm.
it was a huge milestone. Lots of
Yeah.
tears. And so, yeah, so it's still in development. It's been re-optioned, which has been great. And in the meantime, I decided to expand it and write the novel version. So
Wow.
I've written the book version called Her Better Self. And legally, I have the publishing rights. So
Mhm.
I'm in support of my film agent and my book agent. And my book agent really liked the first draft. And so I'm rewriting it, and we're hoping to go out with it in the spring. And it's got a bit of a
Amazing.
girl on the train sort of
Mhm.
thriller vibe, and it's expanded a lot of the shorts what was in the short story. And yeah, and ultimately I'll have the book, whatever happens with the movie. Hopefully they'll both come out
Well,
around
it
the
sounds like that you have like amazing traction on both. So that's unusual to go from short story to novel. Um, I mean, have you done that before?
Not really. Mm-mm. I mean, I've written short stories, nothing that I love fiction. I mean, I've also
Right.
written, nonfiction. It was more that I had the short story and just didn't want to rely on Hollywood, was kind of listening to myself and saying, what do I want to write next? What haven't I
Right.
not fully unpacked? What is still burning in there? What is that, my imagination still like looping around
Mhm.
constantly? And it was that story. Just, I wanted to take it further. Um,
Right.
and it helped, to have the spine, the loose high concept of the short story. Um,
Mhm.
and I loved it. I loved it. And so, and I had written the other motherhood screenplay in between, and that was when COVID hit. And I was just like, and Hollywood was understandable. Everybody was, shut
Right.
down. And what can I do? And not have to depend on, not write a blueprint and then need others to do something with it, but where I can just sit and wrap myself in prose.
Mhm.
It's glorious.
Yeah, it's true actually.
I know.
Writing as a saving is such a fabulous escape right now,
It's
really.
delicious.
It
I,
really is, must
I don't
say.
know. Somebody told me you could have, $100 million and everything you want, but you're not allowed to ever write again. That'd be a tough call. I take that away from me,
Yeah.
right?
It
Yeah.
it's essentially, yeah, I mean, it's how you survive, really. I think it's a survival mechanism for those that have to do it. That's the best analogy I
Mhm.
have, but
And make sense of the world, make sense of our world, and in doing so, connecting with other people who go, oh my God, I felt that way too. I thought I was alone. I feel
right,
understood. I feel seen. You said the thing
right.
that I haven't admitted to myself or to anyone, or and it's that constant need to connect that I think fuels it, but through telling stories. Um,
Well, I think you actually touched on it earlier. I mean, it's not coincidental that, so much of your fiction and nonfiction has touched on motherhood, because it's been something that, has preoccupied you at a very, I'm assuming, conscious and subconscious level for many, many years. And sometimes, the ways I imagine to deal with trauma or to deal with traumatic events is to write about them. Like, it's really, I think one of the only ways to get it out of your system, right?
Yes. Yes, and most writers, and that's one of the differences that I found with screenplays and books. Very distinctive differences. A lot of novelists, authors, memoirists are writing from a not what's the cool idea that I can then retrofit
right
piece of work. It's something that has been gnawing at us. That it's that burning thing that needs to be told, and through telling it, we come to terms that we heal, we make sense of it. And so I think that's ultimately why I don't remember your question, why I think for me novel writing is so healing. There's a lot of ideas, and so you said, I started doing this, I wasn't intentionally pursuing this cool motherhood AI thing, so that because that's a cool time wise, I didn't plan it. I tried to plan a trend against a trend, like forget it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that I started writing later, when I was grappling with the realities, and it wasn't this abstract thing in the future. It was when I was being weighed down by it.
Right. So tell us about, what are the big projects coming up for you?
Wow. Well, I gotta finish this book. Gonna get the Amblin extended novel, Her Better Self. Have my agent give me notes. Hopefully, go out with it in the spring. I have another screenplay that I'm considering. I'm plotting. I'm actually doing research for. It's based on something from a long time ago, but sort of a biopic. And I have an independent film that I wrote that's a small movie that there's a producer attached that's, I believe, in pre-production. It's a little movie. So I'm hopeful about that. And then I'm going to contemplate my next book. And then all around that, as you know, I'm a coach. I'm a writing coach.
Yeah. So tell us, because I have to acknowledge, Oritte has been a writing coach for me, and I've relied on her expertise in the past. And it blew my mind, some of your insights. So tell us about your company, about how you help authors.
Yeah, so I always felt that I had a unique sort of experience, having been in the film side and in the book side, and just being by nature nurturing, like wanting to fix problems, right? And I think that's even having worked in advertising. It's like, what's the shorthand, like, and seeing I never really had a mentor, and I did take a circuitous route to get to where I am, to save people who just don't know, and demystify the process for them, and say, wait, you're right, you're writing that idea as a 500-page fantasy novel. Why write it as a short story, or start there? Or, just helping them, or frame it as something else, or maybe it should be a female protagonist. What's your goal? And really helping diagnose their block, and then prescribe not just the path forward, but also the components. And I wished that I had that, some of us are lucky to have a community and friends and all that, but ultimately, having a sort of writing therapist who gets it, and yeah, so my experience on the book side, and the screen side, and then on the book side, querying book agents, having written books, having written a memoir proposal and TV, it's some successfully and some not. But it's really, pitching in the rooms in Hollywood, and really learning, putting myself in the shoes of the audience or the person that you're pitching your project to, and how to frame your story so that it not only is grabbable and it pops, but that also you can go back to your material and think about it in a more organized, high concept way.
Right.
And so it really varies. So all of my clients come to me with different, they're in different stages. They're working on different kinds of projects. The book, the author part, which is, I love it. It's I found my tribe. And I help screenwriters a lot, and I enjoy that. And I've done craft talks on screenwriting, and more so the pitching process, the submission process. What's a query letter? Who do you send it to? How? What to expect? That whole landscape.
Mm-hmm.
But also what I learned from the Amblin project and from my representation in LA and just the climate there, intellectual property, IP, is critical, whether it's a graphic novel or a published short story or a memoir idea based on, something, or a novel, whether it's a bestseller or not. And we've seen the Reese Witherspoon companies, and sure, books are being made into movies, but there's so many wonderful books, published or not published, that fell under the radar, that can be incredible screen projects if they're given the chance and the exposure and a way to frame them up so that whoever's receiving that submission, be it a manager or producer, can see it as a movie.
Right.
Without compromising the integrity of the book.
Right. I mean, I think that's the hard part. I mean, for a lot of writers, as you say, they write, but they're not, pitching. I mean, I hear it all the time. It's the pitching part that petrifies everyone. I mean, is there one or two lessons you can impart for people that are about to pitch? Like what should they know?
That's a great question. Besides, I always say, why do we care?
Right. That's a good one, actually. It's true.
Why do we care? Like, why would someone want to watch this? And it's not like, but pitching, be succinct. We don't want to get in the weeds. Nobody wants to hear the guy walks out the door and then he goes here and it's this. Frame it up. People sort of cringe when someone says it's this meets that. It's, Flatliners meets, Get Out. I just made up a random mishmash.
Someone's gonna run with that.
I haven't seen either in a while. Set, and give us the context, set and the tone. So that right away they have something to hook into. It's a movie. It's a thriller in the vein of X that follows the story of a woman who ends up in a da-da-da. So keep it broad, but the pitfall, understandably, is that people get into the themes or the feelings or the world. They'll describe the whole world. Right. What's the story? Who are we following? What happened? And that is hard, but I recommend people write out as if you're emailing a friend or you're sitting at a bar. Tell me what your story's about. Tell me what your story's about. And sort of stepping away from being hemmed in from the paper, the computer, and trying to form perfect sentences. Be more casual about it and succinct.
Yeah, I can see that. I've had people try to explain what their story is about to me, and I think there's nothing more irritating and demeaning because, of course, you want to. If you can't figure it out for yourself, you actually don't want to read the story. I mean, for the most part. So I think that's
exactly.
You said something to me that at once in a previous meeting, which was brilliant. So I actually really need to repeat it because I tell all my writer friends now that especially when they're looking at their chapters and rewriting. I mean, get in. You say get in at the last possible moment and get out at the
early as possible.
And
yes.
That
finish
really
right. So get out early. Don't answer the question. Right. Don't answer the question yet. Leave it for the next scene and start it later.
Right.
So we keep, it's the key to keeping a story moving, but it's also it's actually a screenwriting, and there are a lot of screenwriting formulaic or tropes that I've learned that I've applied even subconsciously originally to books. And there's storytelling is storytelling ultimately, right? So there are some tricks, and I'm working with you as well. There's a way to even look at your novel through a screen lens and still have it be an incredible literary novel.
Right.
But thinking more visually, thinking about pacing.
No, this has been great. So I don't know if we mentioned it specifically, but the company is called PitchSmith. So everyone, if you're looking for support on transitioning from book to film, I highly recommend that you look up Oritte. And other than that, I can't wait to see what comes next for you.
Thank you so much. This has been really great.
It's been lovely. And thank you so much. We will have you on again after the Spielberg movie comes out.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Bye. And thank you, everyone.